Take a breath there just a second. We're going to go into a station break here at the top of the hour. Dr. Dennis Cuddy, one of the three panelists today, our annual checkup in the world of globalism. I guess I'm calling it annual, and we seem to be doing at least one of these a year. Dr. Dennis Cuddy has written a series of series. He's got a new one going up on the Common Core and its origins. All of his 300 some odd articles can be read at newswithviews.com, Brandon House's website, worldviewtimes.com, and Pat Wood, technocracyrising.com. We're saying goodbye to some of our radio stations right now, but you can always find us at steelonsteel.com. Do like us on Facebook if you would. And also we have a Facebook page, Praying for Persecuted Christians. We'll be back after the news break with our roundtable discussion on globalism. We're at steelonsteel.com. I'm John Leffler. The program is Steel on Steel. The Ark of Hope, the Earth Charter, things looking very much religious in nature, being supported by people supporting global government. Welcome back to Steel on Steel. John Leffler here with you, and we're doing our annual roundtable checkup on the area of what are the globalist elites all up to. They keep talking about this new order. This word pops out every so often, and it's been popping quite a bit lately among various people, especially in the new international economic order, whether or not they're planning on it or calling for it. That's what's happening. We have a roundtable going here today. First of all, Brandon House at worldviewtimes.com, Pat Wood, technocracyrising.com, and Dr. Dennis Cuddy, newswithviews.com. He's got over 300 articles there. Now, we went into the break saying this whole thing has a large religious dimension, which is really interesting because at a time that the Western governments are secularizing more and more, or at least trying to do that, this very same people trying to do that at their governmental level are actually including a very large religious dimension in what they are doing in terms of this move towards globalism. And it almost seems like the secularism is merely a way to keep the other religions in check until the new system can be put in place. So go ahead, Dr. Cuddy.
So they're always mimicking and substituting authority, which actually goes back to the Garden of Eden because Eve was tricked, basically, by the serpent. Before she ate the forbidden fruit, whatever God said do, she did it. Whatever God said not do, she didn't. But Satan didn't come up and say, "Hi, Eve, I'm Satan. Do the opposite. Go and eat the fruit." He started as a values clarification process like the public schools are doing. Say, well, did God really mean that, Eve? Are you sure about that? And what he did was get Eve to thinking about it. So what he actually did psychologically, like Brandon was saying, these are the social sciences, not just hard sciences, was he got her to change the locus of control. It was no longer automatically doing what God said. Eve was now going to be the final moral arbiter as to what Eve was going to do. Same thing with the public schools. And so all of these elements are involved. You have the economic element, which will be a synthesis of capitalism into communism into socialism. You'll have a fascistic gradual easing into that because you're going to link the corporations and the government. You're going to have technocracy because all of this stuff will be driven by the technological innovations that have been and are coming about, and they will dictate to a certain extent what you can and cannot do. But then you can't eliminate Sustainable Development Agenda 21 things because it's like Henry Kissinger did in that National Security Memorandum 200 back in the early 70s. He said, we'll use food as a weapon, and we won't give this to this, that, the other. So, yes, you have technocracy driving things. You have people's desire to give in to the state as the state and these powerful people use technocracy to maneuver us, limit your economic decisions, whether it's, Obamacare and death panels, or like in a booklet I did called Conspiracy back in the 90s, I said, at some point what they'll do is they will say, we're not forcing you to eat certain things and exercise. However, your insurance premiums will go up if you don't. So you, quote, voluntarily go along with it. And then what happens is it's not any one of these things that will be determinative because you can actually see a point at which the whole technical, not talking technocracy, but the technical system is in serious jeopardy unless the public gives in to Big Brother. For example, you have a lot of hacking going on. All it's going to really take is one really superior, undermining Chinese whiz kid to bring this whole thing crashing down, and the only solution will be for there to be a global monitoring of all technologies they'll have your ISSO numbers. We'll all have our little numbers, and everything will be coded and all this sort of stuff and identified. So they say, well, we have to prevent these nasty hackers from destroying our banking system and so on and so on. So all of these things are control mechanisms that are going to be used to technocracy, economics, wars. They love wars. That culls the population of, as Barbara Marx Hubbard said, the defective seeds that she wanted, namely Christians, that she wants to get rid of. And so all of these control mechanisms will push us forward. As H.G. Wells said, the process will speed up toward the end, and we're rapidly heading that way. And we'll have to combine, like Pat said, in the 30s technocracy. I have a document, the National Planning Board. FDR said this national planning, and technocracy was really into that. So you combine that with regionalism. There's a map in the New York Times of how the U.S. would be divided into regions. And then Zbigniew Brzezinski at the 1995 Gorbachev State of the World Forum said, we're not going to get to world government through one quick leap, but we'll link these regions first. And so all of these things are coming together toward this ultimate goal, which Brandon said, Alice Bailey said in 1933 that the World Federation of Nations would be taking rapid shape by 2025. And that's where we're headed.
What are the stressors on faith going to be? Because at one point, these were all nice little ideas that we could all debate and say academically they're coming. But now the impression I'm getting from what Pat says is this is going to be an all-inclusive system. But what happens for those people who don't want to be inclusive? Because as we mentioned, it's not just a political system. It's not just economic. It has a religious side to it. For people who have really either biblical convictions, I can see that long-term Orthodox Catholics are going to be crowded right back into a corner. You can see this one coming because there's already this struggle going on inside Catholicism, although I don't think they recognize exactly what it entails. So what are the stressors on faith going to be?
Persecution. It's group consensus, group think, or you'll be persecuted. And you're going to separate the sheep and the goats, the wheat and the tares real fast.
Okay, and then if that's true, though, Dennis, it's nice to say persecuted, Brandon, but Dennis hinted at it already. How will that be enforced?
They try to avoid this sort of Hitlerian knock your door down and grab you out and shake you. What they do is, first of all, they condition the people. You have justice, right? Well, the woman there holding little scales, she represents justice. She's really a pagan deity, supposedly the daughter of Uranus and Mother Gaia, right? So what you have flowing through the French Revolution, when they say liberté, by liberté, they don't mean what we mean. They meant license. They plopped a prostitute on the altar of the Cathedral in Notre Dame as their sign of rebellion. They bring that through to stories, so they condition little kids like Dorothy. Dorothy, it's really, the Wizard of Oz is a theosophical allegory is what it is. Dorothy represents the courage and the Tin Man and the brain and all that. Save Mother Gaia, which is Dorothy, and, we get the wizard. He's really fake, so God's really a fake. He's just some farce up there behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to him. Like, don't pay attention to God. You're going to have to save yourself. So, you click your heels and you go back to Kansas with Toto and so on. So what happens is, like I said about Jack London saying W.J. Gint's work, Our Benevolent Feudalism Will Be the Guide, is not only do you have persecution, but overt persecution, you have an ostracizing, whether you're Orthodox Christians or Jews. You'll be minimalized, you'll be ridiculed, you'll pay a price. It may be, as Gint said, unless you follow the desideratum of the nobles, the technocratic nobles of the day, you'll find that they don't knock your door down. It's simply that when you go apply for these jobs, you won't get it. And after a while, you'll get the message. So it's like in 1984, the book, where Winston's being tortured. And in the end, he goes running along, hooray for Big Brother. And Winston said, we will never succumb. But toward the end, after he's tortured, he said, okay, I submit. And then O'Brien, Big Brother's agent, tortures him some more. And he said, what are you doing? I said I'd submit. And O'Brien says, look, we're going to get you to a point where you're not just going to respond the way we want you to out of fear, but you will come to love Big Brother. So it's a conditioning psychological process. And what they do is they've conditioned the people to accept certain things. For example, you find a lot of Christians going to James Bond movies. So what they'll do is they won't say, hey, let's have a movie about fornicating all over the place. No, they spice it up, with heroic activities against the evil communists. And the Christians are supposed to overlook the fact that he's jumping in bed with all these women who could kill him at any moment, in real life. And so you numb the public, you numb their consciousness to accept these things, go along with it. So it's a gradual conditioning process. They dumb them down, and Nero did the same thing, with the Roman Colosseum and all that. Give people a sense of entertainment, get them fat, dumb, and happy, and then threaten to take away their toys, the adults' toys of your cell phones and your computers and so forth. Oh, I can't do without my toys. It's like Pavlov's dog. You can do just about anything you want to, and that's what de Tocqueville said in his book Democracy in America in 1940. He said the people are in danger of becoming like sheep, and that's basically what we're becoming.
I think, John, it'll be the end of your nonprofit 501c3 tax status. And that is what was argued before the Supreme Court by the Solicitor General. It came up, hey, well, could this mean the end of some organization that doesn't agree with same-sex marriage, speaks out against homosexuality? Could they lose their nonprofit status? And the Solicitor General is forced to say, yeah, that can happen. And so I think you're going to see the end of that, which means, again, some of these Christian colleges, and by the way, we already have one up in Boston, a Christian college has already complied. And you saw the Boy Scouts, they've already complied. You're going to see a lot of so-called evangelical organizations all of a sudden comply with same-sex marriage. They're going to allow homosexuals into their college openly, homosexual groups. They'll allow them to put whatever they want in the college paper. These so-called Christian institutions will comply so fast it'll make your head spin so they can keep their 501c3 status. Those that won't comply with that, the next move will be to use hate crime laws to then somehow punish them punitively with a fine or jail time. But I think the old way of revolution is old-fashioned, and the new way is a diffused and dispersed disintegration of the system, according to the Frankfurt School and Herbert Marcuse. So I think the first way is take away your nonprofit status. I think the next way is, okay, if you're not going to comply now and you'll say, we won't need the 501c3, well, then fine. Then we'll come after you. We'll penalize you to the point that you can't afford to not comply, or we'll imprison you. And now we have Tony Blair running around calling for laws in the European Union, in Great Britain, that if you are a Holocaust denier, you could be prosecuted. Well, there are Jews that are writing in Jewish publications saying, that's ridiculous. We don't like the Holocaust deniers, but we would rather deal with the Holocaust deniers than to be robbed of the ability to have freedom of speech. But that's how they'll introduce it. Well, everybody hates the idea of a Holocaust denier. I mean, most people, except for those who are Holocaust deniers. So how can you be opposed to a law that cracks down on haters, the neo-Nazi Holocaust deniers? And so people will agree to that. And then that's how they introduce it. And then pretty soon they realize they just agreed to something that's going to steal their freedom of religion, their freedom of speech. Yeah, and so it'll be done through those policies.
I think you're seeing it at Trinity Western College in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so if you don't comply with government policies, you can continue to graduate your students, but they won't be accepted for a practice before the bar, is what we would call it here, but they won't be accepted by the law societies. And so, yeah, you've trained some attorneys, but they're not going to be able to practice in Canada. I mean, that's the issue that's there.
And if you have a Christian school, their diplomas won't be accredited, so they won't be able to get into a university system.
Even saw the same thing in this little dust-up we've had over the last couple of weeks over the Obama administration saying, well, the elderly are going to have to, if they're Social Security beneficiaries, if they're capable of handling weapons, otherwise they can't have them. And I thought, oh, this is opening a big can of worms. What are they going to do? If you're a Social Security recipient, say, well, you can't receive your Social Security benefits until you comply with our weapons ideas. Now, things that you thought that you worked for and you had a right for, although you and I understand that it's an entitlement system. But anyway, people think it's a right. And now they're being told, well, you can't have that until you jump through all of these hoops. And that's what you were talking about, Dennis.
And that's going to go back to what Dennis and you, John, have talked about with school to work. And what Lamar Alexander, the Republican Secretary of Education, who's U.S. Senator Republican from Tennessee, my state, said that you'll have these under the George H. plan, the one-stop shop with babies in them all the way to adults. And you'll go back for your re-education training for your professional license to be an air conditioning guy that works on air conditioning. You got to be licensed to work with the Freon. And to get that license, you're going to have to go through multicultural, homosexual, pro-feminist education to get that license renewed. And the people who laugh about that, which I was predicting in the 90s, I would have people come up to me at the end of seminars and say, I am an air conditioning repairman. I had to go to such a class to get my license renewed to be certified to use Freon. My own brother, who's an attorney in Minnesota, was being told he had to go through a pro-homosexual course to get his law license renewed. He threw a fit about it, and they finally said, okay, fine, take this pro-feminist class, and you can get your law license renewed. They're going to tie all of your license to this, and you will be going through this brainwashing, this worldview retraining. And if you don't comply, even if you say you agree with it, even when you don't, if you continue vocally saying things or writing things.
In other words, it's voluntary, quote unquote, compliance, meaning there'll be some real serious consequences. Not necessarily jail time or anything. It's just that you won't be able to do certain things. You won't have access to certain health care. If we push towards the idea that this is running as part of Obamacare, but it hasn't come up recently, that, okay, well, we want people to have annual checkups, so we'll build that into this. And of course, part of that checkup is to make sure that you're mentally balanced and that you're mentally healthy. So therefore, you have to go through this mental checkup. Now, you and I